You are Stephen Saul, surgeon at Belsides Hospital, Fulchester.
I am.
Where did you receive your medical training, Mr. Saul?
I qualified as a surgeon in Australia, my home country. I worked there for a while, and I came to Britain. I was at the Merriman Foundation for 18 months in Edinburgh, and since then at Belsides.
Now, on the night of May the 7th last at Belsides Hospital, did you perform a heart transplant operation on Eric Maple, a patient in the intensive care unit?
I did, yes.
And what was the result of that operation?
Well, as they say, the operation was a great success, but the patient died.
Did you seek the consent of the patient's next of kin to the performing of the operation?
No, I did not.
Did you seek the consent of the patient himself?
Oh, yes. I sought that and got it.
Well, perhaps you could tell us the circumstances in which you sought and obtained his consent.
Eric Maple was a patient in the unit who, for one reason and another, I was more than ordinarily concerned about. He was a desperately sick man. He was suffering from a diseased mitral valve. In my book, he needed surgery to have a chance of survival, but Sir Austin didn't agree.
What was Sir Austin's objection to surgery in Eric Maple's case?
He had a notion that medication would do the trick. That or a pacemaker if things got worse. But I didn't agree. What if a new strain was suddenly put on him? What if he had a coronary, for instance?
You said precisely that to Sir Austin, did you?
Oh, yes, I told him that. No irresponsibility there.
And how did Sir Austin respond?
Badly. There was a row. Finally, I told him that if he didn't consent to the mitral valve operation, he could be forcing us to having to think about a transplant operation sooner or later. It was instinct rather than reason, if you like, but events have proved me right.
And what did you do next?
I approached Mrs. Maple, but she turned me down flat. You know all that. I'd noticed something a bit odd about Eric in the many chats I'd had with him in intensive care. It seemed to me that he wasn't half as much in harmony with his wife as he liked to make out. In fact, he was a bit scared of her. So I decided that I'd have a go at approaching him independently. Now, when he found out just how bad things could really get, he practically begged me to do anything I could to keep him alive. He had nothing against a heart transplant, but he had a hell of a lot against dying. He just agreed with his wife because it made for a peaceful life, but deep down, he felt quite differently.
No one was with you when you spoke to Eric Maple in this way, Mr. Saul?
Oh, no, I've never witnessed, if that's what you mean.
Now, on May the 7th at about 7 p.m., Eric Maple had this massive coronary attack.
That's right. Couldn't have happened at a worse time, really. It was a Saturday night. You see, there's not much staff about. With the help of Sister Bland and two of the housemen, I got Eric onto a heart-lung machine. I cracked his chest, and it only took one look to see what was up. The heart had been straining like a team of horses. The muscle was terribly scarred. It was critical, in my view.
So what did you do, Mr. Saul?
Well, first of all, I just tried to figure it. I mean, you see, once you've got a patient on a heart-lung machine, you've got quite a bit of time to weigh things up. The blockage wasn't going to clear, that was for sure. Even if it did, the heart was too badly damaged to ever take over again. So I decided that I'd better contact Sir Austin Semple.
Where did you go to do this?
Veronica Bland's office. It's the nearest phone.
And did you in fact contact Sir Austin?
No, just as I came into the office, a hospital orderly came in with a notification from casualty. It was to say that a heart was available. The consent forms were in order. And the urgency of the question was, could we use the heart or should casualty contact other cardiac units in the area? Well, all thought of contacting Sir Austin just went out of my head. I went straight back to the theatre and I told Veronica to alert the transplant team.
Did you say something else to Sister Bland at this time?
Yes, I said that Sir Austin was in the country and that he couldn't be reached. And I said, the hell with Sir Austin.
And did you also say, the hell with Eric Maple? If I'm supposed to be on the lookout for a guinea pig, then I just found a main contender, didn't I? This is where I blind the world, whatever it costs.
Yeah, I said something like that.
Now, would you tell the court what you meant?
Well, I mean, in saying the hell with Eric Maple, I didn't mean that. You know, the guinea pig, that's not the way I looked on him. I was excited. What I meant was, look, I mean, surely it's obvious. It was just irony. This is where I blind the world. Surely you don't think I meant that? I mean, the calculations that mattered when something like this. First of all, there was no time to waste. Ideally, you should transplant a heart out of a donor's body almost before it stops beating. Now, contacting Sir Austin would have only meant prevarications, delay, ultimate failure to save my patient. Secondly, any other operation could not really be counted upon to have achieving a lasting effect. A bypass operation would have been pointless because it would require the heart to take up as a pump again. And I'd already made up my mind that it was so badly scarred as to make that impossible. Now, thirdly, as long as Eric Maple remained on a heart-lung machine, he was as good as dead anyway, so I might as well go for broke. Have a shot at the old miracle syndrome. Resurrect him.
Mr. Saul, I would like you to explain that last remark.
Well, let's face it, my lord. I mean, do you know how long a human being can last on a heart-lung machine? Days, months, years, theoretically. But as long as the heart doesn't take over again, then that person just isn't alive. They're a vegetable. They're a process. You've either got to continue until it makes an idiocy out of the whole business of living and dying. I am accused of criminal irresponsibility, of manslaughter. But the criminal irresponsibility occurred weeks before, I say, when Sir Austin Semple refused to replace that diseased mitral valve. If that had been done, Eric Maple would still be alive today, grateful to the medical profession, instead of just another one of its victims.
You know, Mr. Saul, it's really a great pity that at the time you discussed the subject of a possible heart transplant with the patient Eric Maple, there was no one else present to hear just what was said.
Well, the fact is, of course, I didn't expect anything to happen to Eric quite so soon.
It's usual, isn't it, in cases where a transplant is envisaged, to get the written consent of the patient himself or next of kin.
Yes, that's where you seriously envisaged the likelihood. I guess I didn't.
Ah. Yet when Sir Austin Semple poured cold water on your enthusiasm for an operation to replace the diseased mitral valve, you told him then he was putting the unit in the position of having to consider a transplant eventually.
Well, it was to try and impress upon him just how serious I thought things were. I hardly expected that very contingency to arise by the end of the same week, obviously.
I see. From the point of view of medical ethics, however, shouldn't you really have approached Mrs. Frida Maple before embarking on this operation?
Look, I'm not pretending everything I did on May the 7th was the way that it should have been done. But if I broke the rules, it was because I had to. It was a top emergency. There was a heart available, and it had to be transferred quickly.
Yes, I quite see that. Yet we're stuck, aren't we, with the unhappy fact that we've only your word for it. Eric Maple consented to the transplant.
Look, if you're trying to say that I'm lying, well, just go ahead.
We might well come to something like that, yes. For you are capable of lying, aren't you, Mr. Saul? You lied to Miss Bland when you told her Sir Austin Semple was in the country and couldn't be reached.
That was because...
You allowed that lie to be accepted by the whole transplant team. Now, they'd hardly have let you proceed if they'd known Sir Austin Semple simply hadn't been contacted, would they?
The team is made up of local surgeons who hold themselves in readiness for when the call of emergency goes out. They don't have to ask questions on the administrative side.
What did you say on the night of May the 7th that was true, I wonder? Could it have been that other remark to Miss Bland? This is where I blind the world, Veronica, whatever it costs.